I was decorating the wedding cake when I noticed the groom's name on the tag. Tom Monroe, my husband's name. I thought it was a coincidence until I saw the bride's name right below it. Carol Jenkins, my best friend's name. My hands froze, the icing bag slipping from my fingers. My heart didn't break, it went completely still. People around me were laughing, setting up flowers, music playing in the background. I walked toward the banquet hall, pretending to check on the cake table. And there they were. Tom in his new tux, looking nervous but proud, and Carol in a white dress that looked like it came straight out of my old closet. When her eyes met mine, her smile disappeared. For a second, time stopped. She whispered, "Linda, you weren't supposed to see this yet." I looked at her, then at Tom, who couldn't even meet my eyes. I just said, "Make sure it tastes sweet. Betrayal usually doesn't." Then I wiped my hands on my apron, set the cake knife down, and walked out of that hall like a ghost leaving her old life behind. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even look back, because in that moment I realized something simple but brutal. They had already buried the woman I used to be, and I wasn't going to stay in that grave with them. When I got home that night, the house smelled like sugar and coffee, but everything inside me tasted like metal. I hung my apron on the same hook I had used for 25 years and stood there, staring at it like it belonged to someone else. My phone buzzed over and over again. Carol called first, then Tom, then the pastor from our church. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat at the kitchen table, listening to the sound of the refrigerator humming like it was the only thing still alive in that house. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. It was strange how quiet betrayal can be when the shouting is all in your head. I thought about the thousands of mornings I woke up early to pack Tom's lunch, the birthdays I baked for Carol's kids, the time she told me I was the sister she never had. I kept thinking, how long did they plan this? Was it while I was baking for them? Every memory felt like a lie that had just been waiting to rot. The next morning, I went to church out of habit. Everyone smiled like nothing had happened. I realized they didn't know yet, or maybe they did and didn't want to be part of the mess. I sat in the back pew, staring at the stained glass window, wondering how faith was supposed to survive when trust had been burned to ashes. The pastor talked about forgiveness, about letting go of what hurts us. I almost laughed. Forgiveness sounded like a luxury for people who hadn't been gutted from the inside out. When I got home, Tom's suitcase was gone. There was a note on the counter. "I'm sorry you found out this way. I hope someday you'll understand." Understand what? That he traded years of loyalty for a moment of excitement? That he left the woman who built his world for the woman who envied it? I folded the note and placed it in the trash under the coffee grounds. That's where it belonged. The days after blurred together. People stopped by, some out of pity, some out of curiosity. "You deserve better, Linda," they said. "He's not worth it." But none of those words could fill the silence that echoed after they left. Nights were the worst. I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore, only to find the cold side of the bed untouched. I started baking again, not for orders, just for noise. The sound of the mixer, the smell of butter and flour, it reminded me I was still here, still capable of creating something sweet in a world that had turned sour. One evening, Carol sent me a message. "I know you hate me, but please, can we talk?" I stared at the screen until it went dark. I didn't hate her. Hate would mean she still had power over me. What I felt was emptiness, a clean, sterile space where love used to be. And maybe that emptiness was my first taste of peace. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to take care of anyone else's feelings. I could just sit with mine, no matter how ugly they were. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. Outside, the street was quiet. The world kept spinning, completely indifferent to my heartbreak. And somehow that made it easier to breathe. I whispered to myself, "You're free now. You just don't know what that means yet." I didn't know where I would go or what I would become, but I knew this. Staying in that house meant living with the ghost of who I used to be. and I was done haunting myself. I met Tom when I was 22 and still thought love was supposed to save you. He came into the small church bakery where I worked, trying to fix a broken coffee machine. I remember the smell of oil and sugar mixing in the air as he joked, "Guess I'm here to rescue your caffeine supply." I laughed, probably too much. Back then, I was the kind of girl who believed a good man could fix anything if he just cared enough. He wasn't handsome in a movie star way, but he had that steady, quiet confidence that makes you feel like the world won't fall apart as long as he's around. We married 2 years later, right there in that same church, surrounded by people who brought homemade pies instead of wedding gifts. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The first years were simple. We didn't have much, but we had each other and a dream. I baked cakes for birthdays and weddings, and he opened a small auto shop down the road. Every morning, he'd stop by my kitchen for a cinnamon roll before heading to work. He always said, "You're my lucky charm, Lynn." It sounded cheesy, but I believed him. We built a life brick by brick, mixing exhaustion with hope. Some nights, we'd sit on the porch, counting lightning bugs and planning all the things we'd do once business picks up. Funny how you never realize that happiness doesn't announce when it's leaving, it just slowly stops coming home. Then came Carol. She joined the choir at church, a burst of energy in every room. We hit it off instantly. She'd stop by the bakery to help me decorate cupcakes or gossip about church events. She was divorced, always laughing about how men were too much trouble. I felt lucky to have a friend like her. She said I reminded her of her sister who had passed away young. I believed that too. We were inseparable. Sunday brunch, late night phone calls, even vacation trips with Tom tagging along, rolling his eyes at our inside jokes. I thought she was family. Sometimes, looking back, I wonder if she saw something in my life she wanted before even realizing it herself. The stability, maybe, the routine. Or maybe it was just that I made things look too easy. Love, loyalty, faith. I didn't know that being the good one could make people secretly resent you. I just kept baking, kept smiling, and kept thinking that kindness would protect me from cruelty. I was wrong, because cruelty often wears a friendly smile before it shows its teeth. One night, after closing the bakery, Tom picked me up from work. Carol was waiting outside, saying she needed a ride home. We all laughed in the car, singing along to old songs. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I caught Carol watching him the way a woman watches something she already decided to take. It was just a second, but something in my chest tightened. I brushed it off. I told myself, "Don't be paranoid, Linda. They're friends, your family." And I drove on, straight into the darkness that was already waiting for me. It started small, the kind of changes you only notice when it's too late. Tom stopped coming by the bakery every morning. At first he said he was too busy at the shop. Then he said he was trying to cut down on sugar. I laughed, said I'd make something savoury instead, but he just smiled, that distracted smile people wear when they're already halfway somewhere else. We still talked, still ate dinner together, but the silence between us grew louder than any argument could have. I told myself this was what marriage looked like after 20 years. Comfortable, quiet, familiar. I didn't realize comfort can sometimes be another word for distance. Carol was around more than ever. She said she was helping me promote the bakery online, and I was grateful. She took photos of my cakes, posted them with little captions like "Made with love by my best friend Linda," and tagged Tom's shop to help him too. People loved it. They said we were the picture of community spirit. I didn't know that behind those smiles, a different kind of story was already being written. One evening, I walked into the bakery after hours and found Tom fixing the sink. Carol was sitting on the counter, swinging her legs, laughing at something he said. They didn't see me right away, and for a moment I just watched them. It wasn't anything obvious, no touching, no flirting, just a kind of softness between them that used to belong to me. When Tom noticed me, he said, "Hey babe, Carol was just keeping me company." I nodded, pretending that explanation didn't sting. After she left, I asked, "You two seem close lately." He shrugged. "She's easy to talk to, that's all." Easy to talk to. I repeated that phrase in my head all night. Funny how words can slice deeper than any knife. A week later, Carol gave me a necklace for my birthday. A little sparkle for the sweetest soul I know, she said, hugging me tightly. When I opened the box later, I saw the same necklace in a photo on Tom's nightstand, same brand, same design, only his was on her neck. I tried to tell myself maybe it was just a coincidence, maybe I was being paranoid. I even laughed about it when my sister called that night. "Can you imagine?" I said, thinking something like that about Carol. My sister went quiet, then she said, "Just don't lose yourself trying to believe the best in everyone." I didn't know what she meant back then. Now I do. As months went by, Tom started staying late at the shop. Sometimes he'd come home smelling like Carol's perfume, light and floral, the kind she wore every Sunday. I knew that scent better than I knew my own. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning, trying to see what he saw when he looked at me. My hair had more grey than before, my hands were rough from kneading dough, my waist softer. I used to see a woman built from kindness. Now I just saw someone who had spent her whole life holding things together while everyone else pulled away. I whispered to my reflection, "You can't bake love back into shape, Linda." But I still tried. I made his favourite meals, left notes in his lunchbox, even bought a new dress for church. When Carol complimented it, I felt stupidly proud, like I still mattered. That night, Tom didn't come home. He said his truck broke down, but I knew better. I didn't confront him. I didn't want the truth yet. Because once you say it out loud, it becomes real, and I wasn't ready for that kind of real. The last straw came a few weeks later when Carol invited me to her house for dinner. She said she wanted to talk woman to woman. I almost didn't go, but curiosity won. She had candles lit, music playing, and that nervous energy people have when they're about to confess something. She handed me a glass of wine, and before I could even take a sip, she said, "Linda, I need you to know something. Tom and I didn't plan it. It just happened." The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. I said nothing. She started crying, saying she was sorry, that she didn't want to hurt me. I just stood there, staring at her face, the face I once trusted with my secrets. I wanted to scream, to hit her, to ask why, but all I said was, "You two deserve each other." Then I walked out, leaving her standing in the wreckage of spilled wine and broken glass. And that was the night something in me went completely silent. Tom came home late that night. I was sitting in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside the window. He froze when he saw me. "Linda," he said softly, like he wasn't sure which version of me was sitting there, the wife he used to know or the ghost of the one he broke. I didn't say anything. He dropped his keys on the counter and sighed. "Carol told you, didn't she?" His voice wasn't scared, just tired. That hurt more than anything. He wasn't even afraid of losing me. He had already decided I was gone. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to ask if he ever loved me at all, but the words wouldn't come out. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, looking at the floor. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said. "You and I, we just grew apart." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. "We grew apart," I repeated. "You make it sound like it's the weather's fault." He rubbed his face with both hands. "You're always so calm, Linda, so strong. I didn't know how to reach you anymore." I shook my head. "You didn't want to reach me, Tom. You wanted to be admired again. You wanted to feel young." He didn't deny it. That silence told me everything. The man sitting in front of me wasn't the one who fixed my coffee machine 25 years ago. He was a stranger wearing his face. He looked up finally and said, "I'm sorry." 2 words so small they barely filled the space between us. I thought about all the apologies women accept because they don't know what else to do with the pain. I didn't want to be one of them. I stood up, walked to the sink, and started washing the same plate I'd washed that morning. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't when I said, "I hope she was worth everything you broke." He said, "Don't make this ugly." That was when I realized men like him believe they can destroy your world and still expect you to make it look pretty. I dried my hands and turned to him. "You already did," I said. He left that night with a single suitcase, the one I had bought him for our 10th anniversary. The door closed, and the quiet that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. For days, I walked through the house like a stranger, touching things as if to remind myself they were real. His boots by the door, the dent in the couch cushion where he always sat, the framed photo of us at the county fair, me holding a pie ribbon, him with his arm around my shoulder. I took that photo down, not out of anger, but because I couldn't keep pretending that woman still existed. She was gone, and all that was left was the space where she used to breathe. People say heartbreak feels like fire, but for me it felt like water, cold, heavy, endless. I moved slower, spoke softer, almost like my body was afraid of making noise. I found his wedding ring in the bathroom drawer a week later. It was next to an old razor and a tube of toothpaste half empty. I picked it up, looked at the small engraving inside. Forever, Ellen T. I smiled a little, not from nostalgia but from disbelief. Forever is a word we throw around like confetti, not realizing it sticks to everything long after the party's over. I dropped the ring in the trash can and watched it disappear under coffee filters and eggshells. That was my closure. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet and final. That night, I slept through till morning for the first time in months. I woke up before the sun, opened the window, and let the cold air hit my face. It smelled like rain and something new, something that didn't belong to him anymore. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and made a list of things I needed to do. Call the landlord, cancel joint accounts, pack my things. But at the top of the list, I wrote just one word: leave. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away before you forget who you are completely. The morning I decided to leave, there was no thunder, no crying, no cinematic moment. Just me, standing in the doorway with 2 suitcases and a quiet that felt heavier than both. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and memories. I looked around one last time and said out loud, "Thank you for everything and nothing." It wasn't anger, it was gratitude for the ending. Endings are brutal, but they're also honest. They don't lie about what they take. I drove until the road signs stopped looking familiar. I didn't have a plan, just a direction, away. The farther I went, the more I could breathe. Somewhere near the Montana border, I saw a small town with a "for rent" sign on an old storefront. It had peeling paint and dusty windows, but something about it felt right. It looked broken in a way I could understand. I parked the car and walked inside. The floor creaked like it was exhaling for the first time in years. The landlord, a kind man named Mr. Harris, looked surprised when I said, "I'll take it." He asked, "You don't even want to know the rent?" I smiled. If I can afford pain, I can afford this. That first night, I slept on an air mattress surrounded by boxes and silence. It wasn't peaceful, not yet. It was raw. But it was mine. I woke up early the next morning, made coffee on a camping stove, and stared at the empty space where I imagined my new bakery would be. "Second chances," I whispered. The name came to me like a prayer I didn't know I'd been saying. Maybe because that's all I wanted, a second chance at myself. Setting up the bakery wasn't easy. The oven barely worked, the pipes leaked, and I had more bills than customers. I spent days scrubbing floors and nights baking cookies to test recipes. My hands hurt, my back ached, but the exhaustion felt different this time. It came from building something, not trying to hold something broken together. On the 3rd week, a young woman walked in. She looked nervous, holding a $5 bill. "Do you sell by the slice?" she asked. I smiled and handed her a piece of apple pie. "First one's free," I said. She took a bite and closed her eyes. "This tastes like home," she whispered. That was the first compliment that made me cry. Word spread slowly. Locals started coming by in the mornings for coffee and pastries. They'd tell me about their lives, their kids, their heartbreaks. I listened, poured them coffee, and realized something I'd never noticed before. When people talk about pain over something sweet, it hurts less. My bakery became a little refuge, a place where broken things could still be beautiful. I hung a sign by the register that said, "Baked with forgiveness, served with grace." I didn't plan to write it. It just came out of me like truth always does when you stop pretending. Some nights, loneliness crept back in. I'd close the shop, sit in the dark, and wonder if Tom ever thought of me. But every time that thought came, I remembered the look on his face the night he said, "We grew apart." That look cured me faster than time ever could. It reminded me that some people can only love you as long as you're small enough to fit their comfort. The moment you grow, they get scared. I wasn't small anymore, and maybe that was my real freedom. I started writing in a little notebook, things I learned each day, not about baking, but about being alive again. One of my entries said, "Peace doesn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It seeps in quietly, through cracked walls and tired bones." Another said, "If you ever wonder where home is, it's where you stop apologizing for being yourself." One evening, a group of teenagers came in after school, laughing, full of noise. They asked if they could study there after hours. I said yes. They started calling me Miss L, and before I knew it, my little bakery had turned into a community corner. I'd bake extra muffins for them, and in return they'd help me set up a small sign outside each morning. One of them once said, "Miss L, your place smells like hope." I smiled. "Maybe that's just cinnamon," I said, but I knew it was something more. It was life coming back to me, one breath, one cake, one morning at a time. The first real winter in Montana was brutal. Snow piled up against the bakery door, the wind howled through the cracks, and some mornings I thought the cold would swallow the whole town. But every time I unlocked that door and turned on the lights, I felt something warm push back against the frost. The smell of cinnamon, butter, and coffee. It wasn't just comfort, it was proof that I was still standing. There's a strange kind of power in surviving quietly when nobody's watching. By spring, Second Chance's Bakery had become a local favourite. People came not just for the pastries, but for the peace inside. I learned everyone's names, their usual orders, and the stories they carried behind tired smiles. There was a retired teacher who lost her husband and came every Thursday for lemon bars because he used to love them. A teenage boy who spent his afternoons sketching at the corner table because home wasn't safe. A truck driver who always said, "You remind me of my mama." I never asked questions, I just listened. And somehow, through their pain, I learnt to forgive my own. One day, a journalist from a regional paper came by. She said she'd heard about the woman who built a bakery from heartbreak. I laughed and told her, "That's a bit dramatic. I just got tired of crying." But she insisted on writing a feature. A week later, an article came out titled "The Sweetness of Starting Over." They printed a photo of me standing behind the counter, flour on my apron, smiling like I hadn't done in years. The headline made me tear up, not because of pride, but because it was the first time someone had told my story without calling me a victim. After the article, business doubled. I hired 2 young women, single mums who needed a fresh start. I saw parts of myself in them, the exhaustion, the fear, the quiet hope that maybe life could still be kind. We worked side by side, kneading dough and swapping stories. One of them, Jenny, once said, "Miss L, do you ever think about going back to your old town?" I looked at her, smiled and said, "No, sweetie, the person who lived there doesn't exist anymore." It wasn't bitterness, it was truth. Every once in a while, I'd still get mail forwarded from my old address. Bills, junk flyers, a Christmas card from someone I barely remembered. One afternoon, I opened one by accident. It was from Carol. Inside was a short note. "I heard about your bakery. I'm glad you're happy. I'm not. I just wanted you to know." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where I kept old recipes. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder that pain is part of the recipe too. You just learn how to bake it into something better. By the time summer came, the bakery had grown into something I never planned. We hosted small gatherings on weekends, book readings, music nights, little charity events. I started teaching kids how to bake, mostly orphans from a nearby shelter. Watching them mix flour and sugar with pure joy made me realize I'd finally built the kind of life I used to only dream about. One afternoon, one of the kids asked, "Miss L, are you married?" I smiled. "I used to be." The little girl frowned. "So now you're alone?" I knelt down, wiped flour off her nose and said, "No, honey, now I'm free." Freedom, I learned, doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly, like a soft exhale after holding your breath for too long. It's waking up in the morning and realizing no one owns your peace. It's laughing without checking who's watching. It's walking into your own life and feeling like you finally belong there. Sometimes, when the sun sets and the whole bakery smells like baked bread and laughter, I stand by the window and watch the light fade over the mountains. I think about that younger version of me, the one who stayed silent, who believed love meant endurance. I wish I could tell her that leaving doesn't mean losing. It means remembering you still exist. One evening, as I was locking up, Mr. Harris, my landlord, stopped by. "You've done something special here, Linda," he said. "You turned a dying place into the heart of this town." I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. "I just added sugar," I said. But when I walked back inside, I realized it wasn't sugar. It was courage. Every brick, every cake, every cup of coffee had been built from the pieces of a woman who refused to stay broken. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was rebuilding anything. I was simply living. It had been almost 3 years since I left Oregon when the past found me again. I was rolling out dough one morning, the radio humming quietly in the background, when the bell above the bakery door rang. I looked up, expecting the usual regulars, maybe one of the high school kids. But when I saw who it was, my heart skipped, not in fear, but in the strange recognition that comes when a ghost walks in wearing human skin. Tom stood there, older, thinner, the lines on his face deeper. His hair had gone grey at the edges, and his eyes, those steady brown eyes I once trusted, looked hollow. "Linda," he said, barely above a whisper. I wiped my hands on my apron, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Tom," I said, nodding like he was just another customer. Behind him stood Carol. I almost didn't recognize her. She had lost weight, her skin pale, her smile gone. She held a small purse against her chest like it was armor. "We didn't know where else to go," Tom said. We saw the article about your bakery." I waited, silent. He cleared his throat. "The shop back home, it went under. The bank took the house. Carol's been sick. We're trying to start over." For a second, I just stared at them. I wanted to feel anger, satisfaction, pity, something. But what I felt instead was distance, like they belonged to another lifetime I'd already buried. I asked softly, "What do you need?" Tom hesitated. "Work, anything. We'll do whatever you need." Carol looked down, her voice trembling. "I can't stand much, but I can decorate pastries. You taught me once, remember?" She tried to smile, but it broke halfway. I nodded slowly. "There's always room for people who want to start over," I said. "You can start tomorrow, both of you." They looked stunned. Tom blinked. "You'd really... after everything?" I shrugged. "After everything, especially. Because I'd learnt something about grace. It's not about letting people back into your life. It's about proving they can't ruin who you've become." When they left, Jenny, one of my assistants, came out from the kitchen. "Was that who I think it was?" she asked. I nodded. "You're really going to let them work here?" I smiled faintly. "They need work. I need help. It's business, not charity." But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was closure dressed as kindness. The next morning, they showed up early. Tom wore an old flannel shirt, sleeves rolled, ready to work like he used to. Carol wore a scarf around her head, her hands trembling slightly. I gave them simple tasks. Tom cleaned the back storage room, Carol handled frosting. It was strange watching them move around my space, a space built from the ashes they left behind. At first, the other employees whispered, but I shut it down. Everyone deserves a second chance, I said. And I meant it. During lunch, Carol came to me, wiping her hands nervously on a towel. I just want you to know, she said quietly, I never stopped feeling guilty. Every night I thought about what I did to you. I looked at her for a long time before answering. Guilt is heavy, I said. You can put it down whenever you decide to. She nodded, tears filling her eyes, and went back to work. Watching her frost cupcakes, her hands unsteady, I realized something strange. Her punishment had already happened long before she walked into my bakery. Life had done what revenge never could. Tom tried to talk a few times. He'd linger after hours, offering to fix the sink or check the oven. One evening, as we were closing, he finally said, You look happy, Lynn. I didn't look up. I am, I said simply. He nodded. You always were stronger than me. I smiled faintly. You just never noticed. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. And I didn't ask. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching snow fall outside. I thought about how strange life is, how the same people who broke you can someday show up at your door, asking for help. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we're all just walking each other home, even when the road is paved with things we'd rather forget. For the first time, the past didn't scare me. It was just there, like old wallpaper under fresh paint, still a part of the wall, but no longer the thing you notice first. The first week they worked there, the air inside the bakery felt heavier. It wasn't tension exactly, more like the echo of something unsaid. Every time Tom walked by, I caught the faint smell of motor oil and nostalgia, and I hated that it still stirred anything at all. Carol kept her head down, decorating cupcakes with slow, shaky hands. The customers didn't know who they were, and I didn't tell them. The past was mine to carry, not theirs. One afternoon, Jenny accidentally spilled a tray of hot muffins. The noise startled everyone. Carol rushed to help, burning her hand in the process. Without thinking, I grabbed the first aid kit and treated the burn. She flinched at my touch, whispering, You don't have to. I said quietly, I know, but I want to. When I wrapped the bandage, she started crying. Not from pain, I think, but from the realization that forgiveness doesn't come with permission. It just happens quietly when you stop holding your breath. Tom worked mostly in the back, fixing shelves and repairing equipment. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the wall, lost in thought. Once, I found him looking at an old photo of the bakery's opening day, the one in the newspaper article. You really did it, he said softly. You built something beautiful. I looked at him and said, No, Tom, I rebuilt. He nodded, eyes glistening, but didn't respond. That moment told me more than any apology ever could. Days turned into weeks. I kept waiting for the bitterness to rise up, for the anger to demand attention. But it didn't. Instead, there was a strange peace in the routine. Watching them sweep floors, wipe tables, serve customers, it felt like watching two ghosts try to earn their way back into the world of the living. They weren't villains anymore, just people, flawed, tired, humbled people. And maybe that's what grace really is, seeing the humanity in those who once stripped it from you. One evening, after we closed, Carol asked if she could talk. We sat at the same corner table where I used to write my daily notes. She looked pale under the warm light. The doctors say it's spreading, she said quietly. I don't have much time. I didn't ask what kind. It didn't matter. I wanted to say thank you, she continued. You didn't have to take us in. You didn't have to look me in the eye again. But you did. I looked at her, at the woman who once smiled while standing next to my husband, and felt something unexpected, a tenderness that wasn't pity. I said, Carol, I didn't do this for you. I did it so I could look at myself again without flinching. She smiled weakly. Either way, you saved me. The next morning, she didn't come in. Tom said she was too weak to get out of bed. I told him to take the day off, but he shook his head. No, he said. I need to be here. He worked quietly, like a man trying to atone through motion. Later, when I handed him a cup of coffee, our hands brushed, and for the first time in years, it didn't hurt. It just felt like the closing of a chapter I had already finished reading. That weekend, I hosted a charity bake sale for the local shelter. It was something I did every spring. The whole town showed up. Children laughed, music played, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Tom and Carol were behind the counter, serving customers. Nobody knew their story, and that was the grace of it. They got to exist without being defined by their worst mistake. I watched them laugh with strangers and realized I no longer recognized the woman who once begged for answers. She was gone. What stood in her place was someone softer, steadier, stronger. At the end of the day, as we cleaned up, Tom handed me an envelope. "This is for you," he said. Inside was a small note and a $100 bill. The note read, "For all the times I couldn't see your worth, I see it now." I folded it carefully and slipped it into the pocket of my apron. "Thank you," I said, "but I was never waiting for that." He nodded, understanding. Some debts can't be repaid in money, only in silence. A few days later, Carol came back, thinner, slower, but smiling. "I wanted to work a little more," she said. "It makes me feel alive." I nodded. "Then let's make something beautiful." We spent the afternoon frosting cakes together. Her hands shook, so I steadied them. When she looked at me with tears in her eyes, I said softly, "You're forgiven." Not for her sake, for mine. And the strangest thing happened. I felt light, like the air itself was different, like I had finally exhaled after holding it in for years. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering without bleeding." And as I turned off the lights and locked the door, I realized I had finally done what the younger me never could. I let go without losing myself. The next morning when I came in, there was a bouquet of daisies on the counter. No note, no signature. Just flowers, simple and white, sitting in a glass jar. I knew they were from Tom. Daisies were my favorite, he'd remembered. I smiled, not because I wanted him back, but because life has a way of circling back to the truth. Love doesn't always last, but grace does. The morning Carol didn't show up, I knew something was wrong. She had been getting weaker, her skin turning almost translucent, her laugh fading into whispers. I called Tom, and he answered on the first ring. "She's gone," he said simply. No tears, no trembling, just that flat tone people use when grief has drained all colour from them. I closed the bakery early that day. The customers understood. Some hugged me on the way out without asking why. Word travels fast in small towns, but pain travels faster. That evening, I drove to the small apartment they shared. It was modest, tidy, like they had been trying to live quietly. Carol was lying on the couch, covered in a quilt. She looked peaceful, her face soft in a way I hadn't seen in years. Tom sat beside her, holding her hand. He didn't look up when I entered. I stood there for a while, not knowing what to say. Finally, I whispered, "She found her peace." He nodded, eyes still fixed on her. "You gave it to her," he said. I shook my head. "No, Tom, she found it herself. I just didn't stand in the way." He asked if I'd help him with the arrangements. I did. Not because I owed them anything, but because I understood what closure really meant now. It wasn't about justice, it was about decency. We held a small service at the local church. Only a handful of people came. I baked lemon cupcakes because they were her favourite, the same kind I used to make years ago when we were still friends. It felt strange handing them out after the ceremony, but somehow right. It was my way of saying goodbye, not to her, but to the part of me that once hated her. After the service, Tom and I sat outside on the church steps. The sky was the colour of bruised peaches, that soft mix of pain and beauty you can't separate. He said quietly, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know, I see it now, what you were, what we lost." I looked at him for a long time before answering. "Tom, you didn't lose me. You just let me go too early. And that's something I had to learn to thank you for. He swallowed hard. You really mean that? I nodded. I do. You broke me once, but you also set me free. Sometimes those are the same thing. He looked away, blinking fast. I'm leaving town, he said. There's nothing left for me here. I handed him a small brown paper bag. For the road, I said. Inside were 2 slices of pie. He opened it, smiled faintly. Apple? I nodded. Your favourite. Consider it a final meal between old ghosts. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. You always knew how to make even endings taste sweet. I stood, brushed off my hands and said, Take care of yourself, Tom. He looked up. You already did. Then he walked to his truck and drove away. I watched until the dust settled and the sound faded, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I didn't expect. Relief. That night, back in the bakery, I sat at the table with my notebook. The pages were full of scribbles, lessons, small truths I'd collected like breadcrumbs along the way. I added one more line. Forgiving someone doesn't erase the pain. It just removes their power to keep hurting you. I closed the notebook and let the silence fill the room. It wasn't empty anymore. It was calm, whole. Mine. The next morning, I decided to rename one of my signature pastries. It used to be called Caramel Sunrise. I changed it to Grace. It sold out by noon. When people asked why the name, I said, because it's sweet and messy and takes patience to make right. That seemed to satisfy them, but inside I knew it was more than that. It was a symbol, a way of honouring the storm that made me steady. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, no return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single photo, Tom standing beside Carol's grave, holding a small box. On the back he'd written, Thank you for giving her peace. I'm learning how to find mine. I placed the photo in the drawer next to her old note and the $100 bill, artifacts of a past that no longer defined me, but shaped me nonetheless. Business kept growing, life moved forward, I hired more staff, expanded the bakery to include a small teaching kitchen. We hosted workshops for women rebuilding their lives, divorced, widowed, recovering, surviving. Every time I watched them laugh over burnt cookies and uneven frosting, I saw pieces of my own journey reflected back at me. Pain doesn't disappear, it transforms, like sugar caramelizing under heat, turning dark before it turns sweet. One evening, as I was locking up, a storm rolled in. The rain came down hard, drumming on the windows. I stood at the doorway, watching the lightning stretch across the sky. For a moment, I thought of that younger version of me, sitting alone in a dark kitchen years ago, too afraid to move. I whispered to her through the storm, You made it. Because she had, I had. Every version of me had walked through fire and come out tasting like hope. That night, I slept deeply. No ghosts, no regrets, no questions. Just the quiet rhythm of rain and the soft hum of peace. When I woke up the next morning, the storm had passed. The world outside glistened, washed clean. I brewed coffee, opened the bakery doors, and the first customers came in, shaking water from their coats. I smiled and said, Morning, everyone. Let's make today sweet. And as they filled the room with chatter and laughter, I realized that grace, when carried long enough, turns into strength. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself, because it already has. A few months after Carol's passing and Tom's departure, life at the bakery settled into a rhythm so peaceful it almost scared me. Peace, I've learned, can be just as loud as chaos. It fills every empty corner until you realize you've stopped waiting for something to go wrong. I was wiping down the counter one afternoon when the same journalist who'd written about me years ago walked in again. Linda, she said, grinning, your story's been circulating online again. People want an update. Would you be willing to do a follow-up interview? I hesitated. I had spent so long living quietly, avoiding attention, that the idea of being seen again made me uneasy. But something in me shifted. Maybe it was time. Sure, I said. If it helps someone else start over, why not? We sat in the corner booth, the same one where Carol had once apologised, where so many small moments of grace had unfolded. The journalist asked questions gently at first, how the bakery was doing, how I had adjusted to life here. Then she leaned forward. You've been through a lot, Linda. Betrayal, loss, forgiveness. Most people would have turned bitter. How did you find peace instead? I looked at the recorder on the table, the little red light blinking, and I took a deep breath. I stopped trying to make sense of why people hurt each other, I said, and started learning what I could build from the wreckage. Sometimes what breaks you isn't meant to destroy you, it's meant to clear space for who you're supposed to become. She nodded slowly, scribbling notes. Do you still think about them? Your husband? Your friend? Sometimes, I said honestly, but not with anger. I think of them the way I think of rainstorms. Messy, unpredictable, but necessary. Without them, nothing would have grown. When the article came out a week later, it went viral again, only this time it wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about resilience. People sent letters from all over, women, men, even teenagers, saying my story gave them courage to walk away from what was breaking them. Some came to the bakery just to thank me in person. One woman hugged me and whispered, "Because of you, I left a man who made me feel small." I held her hand and said, "Then you're already halfway home." The town decided to host a local business fair that summer, and they asked me to give a short speech. I laughed at first. I was a baker, not a speaker, but Jenny insisted. People need to hear you, she said. They see the bakery, but they don't know the heart behind it. So I agreed. The day of the fair, the sun was warm, the air thick with the smell of barbecue and laughter. I stood on a small stage, hands trembling slightly, staring out at faces both familiar and new. Hi, I began, voice steadying as I spoke. My name's Linda Monroe, and this little bakery behind me saved my life. The crowd quieted. Not because it made me money, but because it gave me purpose again. You see, life broke me once, and for a long time I thought that meant I was finished. But then I realized something simple. Sometimes the only way to start over is to stop looking back. I told them about the early days, sleeping on an air mattress, baking by candlelight, crying over burned muffins. The laughter that followed wasn't mockery, it was warmth. I ended with this. If you've ever been hurt so deeply that you don't know how to move forward, start by doing one small kind thing for yourself. Bake something, plant something, write something. Don't wait for peace to find you. Build it with your own hands. When I finished, the crowd stood and clapped. Some were crying. Jenny hugged me from behind, whispering, "You did it." I smiled, tears finally falling in a way that felt like release, not grief. Afterward, an older man approached me. "My wife used to bake," he said. "She passed a few years ago. Your words reminded me of her." I squeezed his hand and said, "Then she's still here. Every sweet thing carries the memory of who taught us love." That night, when the fair lights dimmed and the crowd faded, I sat on the bakery porch alone, watching the stars blink awake. The same stars that had watched me cry years ago were now watching me breathe in peace. I whispered, "You made it, Linda," just to hear how it sounded. And it sounded true. The week after the fair, everything changed. My inbox filled with messages from strangers who had read the article or watched a clip of my speech online. Some wrote long letters, others just a few words. "Thank you for reminding me that broken doesn't mean worthless. I'm starting over too. You made me believe kindness is still possible." I printed a few of them and pinned them on the bulletin board behind the counter. Every morning, I'd read one before opening the bakery. It felt like a quiet prayer, a reminder that healing never stops with one person. It ripples. Soon, people began travelling from other towns just to visit Second Chance's bakery. They'd walk in shyly, as if stepping into a sacred place, then tell me their stories, divorces, losses, betrayals, small resurrections. I listened, offered them coffee, and realized that my little shop had become something bigger than me. It wasn't just a bakery anymore, it was a sanctuary built from flour, sugar, and forgiveness. One morning, a young woman came in carrying a baby on her hip. She looked exhausted, eyes red like she hadn't slept in days. "Are you Linda?" she asked. When I nodded, she handed me a letter. "My mom wanted you to have this. She passed away last month." I opened it slowly. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from a woman who had written to me 2 years ago about leaving an abusive marriage. Her note said, "You once said peace comes quietly. You were right. Thank you for helping me find it before I left this world." My hands trembled as I folded it back. The daughter said, "She used to bake your recipes, said they made her feel brave." I smiled, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Then your mum was already brave. The baking just reminded her." After that, I started a small project in her honour. Every Saturday, we hosted a Baking for Healing class, free lessons for anyone going through a tough time. At first, just a few people came, then dozens. Women rebuilding after divorce, veterans struggling with PTSD, teenagers trying to forgive their parents. We baked and talked and cried and laughed. Sometimes the dough didn't rise, and that was okay. I'd tell them, not everything perfect tastes good, and not everything broken tastes bad. It became our motto. The local news did a story on the classes, and soon I was invited to speak at a community conference in Portland about resilience and small business recovery. I almost said no, I didn't see myself as anyone special, but Jenny said, "You're not speaking as a business owner, Linda. You're speaking as someone who made hope look possible." So I went. The hall was packed. I stood on stage, the bright lights blinding, but I wasn't nervous. I spoke from memory, from heart. "You don't have to erase the pain to build a good life," I said. "You just have to stop giving it the last word." When the applause came, it wasn't loud. It was gentle, long, like a heartbeat. After the event, a publisher approached me. "Your story could help millions," she said. "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" I laughed. I can barely finish a grocery list. But she was persistent. A few months later, I found myself sitting in my kitchen, writing chapters late into the night, each one a piece of the road I had walked, each one ending not in sadness but in light. The book came out a year later, Second Chances, the recipe of a life rebuilt. I didn't expect much, but it found readers, thousands of them. Messages came from across the country, some even from overseas. One said, "Your words stopped me from ending my life. I started baking instead." I held that message in my hands for a long time, whispering, "Thank you for staying." The bakery became busier than ever, but it never lost its calm. I made sure of that. The smell of cinnamon rolls still drifted through the air every morning. The laughter of customers still filled the afternoons. I hired more women, most of them rebuilding their own stories. One day, Jenny said, "You realize this place isn't just a bakery anymore, right? It's a movement." I smiled. If it is, then it's made of butter and grace. Years passed. My hair turned silver, my hands slower, but my heart lighter. Sometimes young reporters would come by asking for a quote. They'd say, "You're kind of a legend, Linda. How does that feel?" I'd laugh and tell them, "I'm not a legend. I'm just someone who refused to let bitterness take the best years of her life." And I meant it, because being known didn't matter. What mattered was that people found something in my story that helped them choose life again. One evening, just before closing, a man walked in. He looked about 30, wearing a suit, clearly not from town. He bought a slice of pie and sat near the window. After a few minutes, he approached me. "You don't know me," he said, "but my mother worked for you years ago, Jenny." My heart warmed instantly. "Jenny's son," I said. "You were just a little boy back then." He smiled. "She passed last year. But before she did, she told me, if you ever lose yourself, go see Miss L. She'll remind you who you are." So, here I am. I felt tears rise again. "She reminded me who I was too," I said. He nodded, holding the plate of pie. "She said you changed her life." I smiled. She changed mine. After he left, I stood alone in the quiet bakery, the sun dipping low through the window, casting gold light on everything. It hit me then. My life had come full circle. I wasn't just the woman who was betrayed. I wasn't just the survivor. I had become the keeper of stories, the living proof that pain can turn into purpose if you give it time and heart. I locked up for the night, stepped outside, and felt the evening breeze against my skin. The air smelled like sugar and rain. I looked up at the fading sky and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to life itself, for ending me once so I could learn how to begin again. Sometimes, when the bakery is quiet and the smell of bread fills the air, I sit by the window and think about how forgiveness has become the most misunderstood word I know. People think it's a door you walk through once, and then you're free. But it isn't like that at all. Forgiveness is a hallway. Some days you walk fast, some days you crawl, and some days you just sit there, staring at the walls, wondering if you'll ever reach the end. I used to think forgiving Tom and Carol meant excusing what they did. I don't believe that anymore. Forgiveness isn't a pardon, it's a release. It's cutting the chain that keeps you tied to a version of yourself that can't move forward. There were nights when I still woke up thinking of them, faces from a different life, voices echoing through dreams. I didn't push them away. I let them come, let them leave, like tides that no longer threaten to drown me. Peace, I learned, doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without pain. That's the real miracle. It's quiet, almost invisible, but you feel it when you breathe, when your chest doesn't tighten at the thought of old wounds anymore. I get letters from women every week. Some ask how I did it, how I could ever forgive something like that. I tell them the truth. You don't start with forgiveness. You start with survival. You get out of bed, you brush your teeth, you feed yourself, you keep living until one day you realize you've made it through a day without replaying the moment that broke you. That's when forgiveness begins, not as a decision, but as a symptom of healing. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you do. Sometimes when I'm teaching my Saturday class, I look at the faces around me, so many women holding invisible scars. We bake, we laugh, we talk, and I can see the exact moment when someone lets go, even if they don't realize it yet. It's in the way their shoulders drop or their eyes soften. I've come to believe that healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's like dough rising in the dark. It just happens while you're busy doing the work. If I could go back to that younger version of me, the woman who stood in her kitchen staring at a note that said, "I'm sorry you found out this way," I wouldn't tell her to be stronger. I'd tell her to stop trying to be. Strength is overrated. What she needed was gentleness, for herself, for the part of her that still believed people mean well. I'd tell her, it's okay to break. You'll rebuild differently, but you'll still be you. And maybe she'd believe me, maybe not. But I like to think she'd look at me now and recognize herself again. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes with surviving betrayal. You stop chasing explanations. You stop needing closure from other people. You realize that some questions don't have answers, and that's all right. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you give yourself when you decide the story doesn't get to define you anymore. I think that's what my bakery became for me. Not a business, not even a dream. It was a place to give shape to all the things I couldn't say. Every cake I bake, every loaf I slice, is a quiet act of remembering and letting go. People often tell me I'm strong, that I inspire them. I appreciate it, but I always smile and say, I'm not strong, I'm just done being afraid. Fear is the hardest habit to break. It lingers long after the danger is gone, whispering that you're not enough, that you'll be hurt again. But I've learnt that bravery doesn't mean you stop being afraid. It means you keep showing up anyway, with trembling hands, with scars still tender, but with a heart that keeps choosing kindness. I've also learnt that kindness doesn't make you weak. It makes you untouchable. Because when you lead with kindness, there's nothing left for cruelty to take from you. They can't humiliate a heart that has nothing to hide. They can't shame a soul that forgave itself first. And that's what forgiveness really is, the art of coming home to yourself. If there's one thing life has taught me, it's that freedom doesn't arrive the way we imagine. It doesn't come wrapped in celebration or announced by fireworks. It doesn't knock on your door one morning and say, "You're free now." No, it seeps in quietly, like sunlight through curtains after a long night. You don't even notice it at first. You just wake up one day and realize you're no longer waiting for someone else's apology to breathe again. For years, I thought freedom meant escape, getting away from the pain, the memories, the people who broke me. But true freedom isn't about distance, it's about release. It's the ability to stand in the same place where you once fell and no longer feel afraid of falling again. It's walking into the same kind of silence that used to crush you and finding peace in it. Sometimes people ask me, "Don't you ever wish things had turned out differently?" I used to. I used to replay every moment, wondering if I could have been better, prettier, smarter, anything that would have made him stay. But the truth is, if I could go back and change it, I wouldn't. Because losing what I thought I couldn't live without is exactly how I discovered what I truly needed, myself. Freedom, for me, began the day I stopped begging life to look the way it used to. The day I stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What now?" There's power in that shift. You stop waiting for the world to give you closure and start realizing that you already hold the key. Every act of courage, no matter how small, becomes a rebellion against the version of you that stayed silent for too long. I've seen people mistake numbness for peace. They shut down, call it healing, and think that's enough. But peace isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of understanding. It's knowing your heart may still ache, but it's no longer in charge of your choices. Pain can sit beside you without driving the car. That's what real control looks like. When I walk into the bakery each morning, I still glance at the framed sign by the door. It says, "Second chances, baked with forgiveness, served with grace." I hung it there years ago thinking it was just a slogan. Now I know it's my creed. Every crumb, every cup of coffee, every story shared inside those walls carries the reminder that none of us are defined by the worst thing we've survived. I remember one afternoon, a woman came in with her teenage daughter. The girl looked angry at the world, the kind of anger that comes from feeling unseen. While her mum ordered coffee, I noticed the girl tracing the cracks on the counter with her finger. I said, "You know, the cracks are where the light gets in." She looked up, surprised, like no one had ever told her that broken didn't mean ruined. She smiled, just a little, and I thought, maybe that's all freedom really is, finding one small reason to smile again when the world expects you not to. Sometimes, when I close up at night, I still talk to God. Not the way I used to, pleading, bargaining, but like an old friend. I thank him for the lessons I didn't want but needed, for the endings that hurt but healed, for the people who betrayed me, because they taught me how strong I could be without them. There's a strange comfort in gratitude, even for pain. It reminds you that nothing was wasted, not even the heartbreak. Every scar is a sentence in the story that made you whole. People say revenge is sweet, but I disagree. Revenge is just another cage. You build it thinking it'll keep your enemies trapped, and then you realize you're the one locked inside. The only revenge worth having is joy, the kind that no one can take from you because it doesn't depend on them anymore. That's what I tell my students now when they come to me crying about who hurt them. You don't have to win, I say. You just have to outlive the pain. And when they ask how, I tell them by being kind, by being real, by choosing yourself every single day, even when it's hard. Because nothing terrifies cruelty more than a heart it can't break. If I had to sum up my life in one sentence, it would be this: no revenge is greater than living freely and kindly. When people underestimate you, answer with calm. When they betray you, answer with dignity. When they leave you behind, walk your own path and let time show who truly lost. The world doesn't need more anger. It needs more people who survived it and chose love anyway. I think that's what my story has always been about, not tragedy, not betrayal, but transformation. The slow, patient alchemy of turning pain into peace. It doesn't happen overnight, it takes years, sometimes decades. But one day you wake up and realize that everything you thought broke you was actually building you. And when that moment comes, you finally understand what freedom really means. Freedom isn't a place you reach, it's the way you walk. It's how you carry yourself through the world, softly, honestly, and unafraid. I still open the bakery every morning at 6 a.m., just like always. The smell of fresh bread fills the air, the bell over the door rings, and life keeps walking in, one story at a time. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the glass case and barely recognize the woman staring back. She looks older, sure, but she also looks free. There's a calm in her eyes that didn't used to be there. Maybe that's what healing does. It doesn't erase who you were, it just makes peace with her. People still ask me, "How did you do it, Linda? How did you survive losing everything?" And I always tell them the same thing. I didn't survive it. I rebuilt from it. Because that's what life really is, a constant rebuilding. Some days the foundation cracks, some days it holds strong, but every day you wake up and choose to build again. And if you can do that with kindness, with honesty, and without bitterness, then you've already won. So if you're listening to this right now and carrying your own kind of heartbreak, please remember this. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become after. And no matter how small the step, keep walking toward the life that feels like home. Because no revenge is greater than living freely and kindly. And rebirth doesn't come from power or money. It comes from truth, compassion, and courage to choose yourself again, even from zero. I am Channel Name, where true stories are told with honesty so that everyone can find their own strength. If this story touched you, please support us by leaving a comment below, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with your friends. Thank you for listening all the way through. May God bless you and your family.